Well, hello, Dr. Phil Greenwood, Emeritus Professor, University of Wisconsin, Wisconsin School of Business, Entrepreneurship. Here's your Entrepreneurial News Minute for October 8th. Kind of an interesting topic, and I just wanted to cover this real quick. New York Times, over the past week or so, had an article about, and I've seen this article in several other sources as well, similar ones, but about the impact of the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, on small business, especially from the standpoint of small businesses that were started during the pandemic. The number of startups increased dramatically. It's up to several hundred thousand more than average, at least in the pandemic. But what's more importantly is that a number of firms that were started during the pandemic are still doing well and thriving very well. So a number of these firms that pretty much had to come along, change the business model, or just a new concept to deal with the pandemic, are still in business and doing well, and it's having a great impact on the economy. Now, a question always comes up in class and with entrepreneurs is, what do we do with events like the pandemic? And I don't think there's any one answer to say you should do this, but one technique or framework that I utilize is something called scenario planning. This is not the scenario of what happens if sales are 10% higher or lower, what's the impact on the bottom line. This is a looking at actual events external to the business that can have a dramatic impact on the organization and the industry. Typically what you do is you put your team together and you brainstorm about what could be events that could happen that could affect our business. Could be a war, could be a hurricane, could be a pandemic, for whatever you think. However, once you come up with that list then of maybe 10, 20 or more, you try to pick 2 or 3. I usually recommend 2 of the critical events as ones to really evaluate and analyze for your scenario plan. And typically how you evaluate what 2 you should pick up, it's what are the most probable or likely, meaning what's the percentage that they could occur, and if they do occur, what's the dollar impact, both profit-wise and sales-wise. It can be negative or positive on your bottom line. Once you have that, then you take your events, the 2 events, put them in a 2x2 table, and look at a minimum 4 different scenarios. What happens if event 1 happens and event 2 doesn't, or what happens if the extreme of one versus the extreme of the other, both positive and negative, come up with. So you pretty much have a minimum of 4 different scenarios that you try to examine and identify and develop narratives for the outcome. Once you develop kind of an outcome narrative for each scenario, then you try to work through, hey, what's going to be the most likely one to happen? And that's where you really spend your time analyzing, and most importantly, you look at your current strategy and compare it to how are we positioned with this potential event if it happens, and you adjust it accordingly for that outcome. You don't necessarily think that the other 3 outcomes don't occur, but the one most likely is where you put your planning into. Now, what I like to recommend to entrepreneurs and small business owners, it's not so much what event you try to predict, because there can be thousands of different events and hundreds of thousands of outcomes, but more of putting in place a process to deal with that. Not only the scenario planning process, but put together a team. Some people call it the emergency team. Some people call it the break the glass team. When the event happens, you've got a team of people involved, no matter what the event is, ready to put in place the emergency. So that's my Entrepreneurial News Minute for today. See you real soon.